How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
Very nice. Very nice. You know, you don't practice that at home at all, right? Not really?
No.
No.
I don't.
And you know what? You don't need to. Because you just do this so naturally. It's effortless.
Once a week.
Yeah. We are now going to talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about a little bit.
We are?
Did you like that?
I did. Some people might not have liked that.
Well,
because it was a tongue-twizzling twister of chaos, but it came back and made full sense.
Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. So I got really amped up this week. I mean, I was looking forward to Thursday since Monday when we had him scheduled and he was pinned down. And, sir, Mr. McAfee,
if you are listening,
I hope you're feeling better.
I certainly do.
And we are looking forward to catching up with you on February 13th.
That's right.
From our studio.
That's right. So John McAfee is out there, and I don't mean out there. He's out there someplace, and we were going to interview him. We are so looking forward to him coming on our show. So, folks, you know, keep that in mind, February 13th. But we are going to have another guest calling in who has actually interviewed Mr. McAfee, and we're going to be talking with him about his interview. We were going to talk with him about our interview, but we can't talk about our interview because we don't have that interview unless we're pressed in and we can anticipate what we would have talked about.
Which we can, because I ran it through in my head the way through the week. Like, okay, here's how this is going to play out. I visualized his reactions and everything.
We're going to talk more about him once we talk with him, but we are going to be having Larry from that Larry show, who's been our guest before, coming in and talking with us. How have you been, Mark?
I've been well. As I was mentioning, I was getting really ramped up for tonight.
Let's go back to that.
And then we got the email today, so I think it actually is going to work out in our benefit.
Yeah,
because you know, Thomas wasn't here.
Right, exactly.
So like I went into the area where we were going to film and tape, and I was like, oh my God.
You were getting anxious.
There's a spider web of wires and outlets and different things to plug into and memory cards and stuff. And I was like, this is way outside my pay grade.
Yeah.
So I was kind of psyched. I feel like we were prepared for the interview, though.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, I've probably consumed 6 to 10 hours of different interviews with this guy, and I find him amazingly fascinating. Yeah. Just brilliant mind. Yeah. So purposeful with his words. Mm-hmm. So clear and concise with the English language. Mm-hmm. He's very impressive, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with him.
I am too. And hopefully February 13th, so 2 weeks from today. Yep. The day before Valentine's Day.
That's right.
So we will be chatting then. But like I said, we're going to be getting Larry on the show and just talking about his experience as well.
Yeah, so he did it in a 2-part series.
Yes.
So he talked to him, and they broke it into 2 pieces. And it was that was probably the best of class that I listened to. So I listened to, he talked to Joe Rogan.
Yep.
Which was a great interview, which kind of broke everything open on him, but it was a while ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh my, you know, it's 2020. This was like 2016 with Joe Rogan's, and I know a lot has happened. And you know, he's got the documentary that was made about him on Showtime now, and he's, you know, he's running for another. I mean, he ran in 2016.
Yep.
As a libertarian.
And he was also on the Dick Show?
He was on the Dick Show.
Right.
Dick interviewed him. There was a couple of others that I listened to. Larry, I think, did the best job with him.
And Larry got him to laugh hysterically.
Yeah.
And you know, hopefully we'll get Larry to tell us about that. But
Larry's
that was
a really interesting guy.
Wonderful to hear. So it's going to be very interesting, a very interesting
So we're going to get into dads again with the America's Father?
We might. I mean, I just had an article, was quoted in an article through HuffPost talking about parenting and yelling and why we shouldn't be yelling at our kids. Let me see, remember who that
was just posted today, right?
It was posted today.
In the Huffington Post.
In Huffington Post.
Nice.
And
congratulations.
Thank you. And it's Catherine Pearson. So a shout out to Catherine Pearson, who's writing a column on parenting, how to stop yelling at your kids and what to do instead. Because experts say that it truly does not work, and it really doesn't. Yelling at your kids has never really worked, and though a lot of people have been yelled at, and they may say, well, my parents yelled at me and I turned out okay.
Well, maybe it didn't.
You know?
How did it feel when they were yelling at you?
What do we really want our kids? Do we want our kids? Our kids will be modeling after us. Our kids will imitate a lot of what we do. So if we don't want them to be yelling at other people, probably better not to. So here's just the tips that I gave to the Huffington Post. Remember, there are different kinds of yelling. Some yelling is perfectly fine. Yelling that is an alarm. Right? Don't cross the street. Watch out for that. Don't burn your hand. Those things, it's a different kind of yelling. You're trying to alert your kid that there's a danger, and it's to be protective. And so there are times where, yes, you really need to get their attention in that way so that they don't hurt themselves. You know, it would be the rarity for a person to say, Billy, careful of that car, and don't cross the street. I mean, unless you don't like Billy. So, and that really, you know, it's not going to happen. But the other yelling, unfortunately, kids will tune out. More often than not, a kid will tune out because the yelling implies that they have less value. It is absolutely in the I am domain, right? So the I am is saying we're all doing the best we can. Let's treat each other with respect. But when you're yelling at someone out of anger, you are really sending a message that they're not doing the best they can, that there's something wrong, they should be doing better, what's wrong with them. And so any human being will do what human beings do because we want to feel valued. We will begin shutting down because I don't want to feel that I'm being less valued, especially by someone as important as my parent. I want my parent to see me a certain way. So here's one of the suggestions that you can do as a parent. Remember, anger is an emotion designed to change things. We get angry when we want somebody to do something different, start doing something or stop doing something, and it is a limbic response. There's nothing wrong with anger. It's what you do with it that's important. Right behind your forehead is your thinking part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for thinking, solving problems, anticipating how to make that solution, executing that plan, and beginning to predict what will happen next. So here's a small suggestion. You're going to get angry with your kid. It's normal. It's fine. It's what you do with it. Take a breath and literally put your hand on your forehead, even if just for a second, just to remind yourself that you want to start being reflective and not reflexive, that you want to start thinking. How many times have you done something impulsively, limbically, and slapped your forehead as if you're trying to jumpstart your prefrontal cortex? Right? So let's be reflective and not reflexive. Yelling at your kid is not going to work. You're going to feel angry. That's normal. It's what you do with it. Larry, are you there?
Hear your voice again.
Ah, it's good to hear your voice again, Larry, of That Larry Show.
How are you, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing great. And Tom, are you there too?
Negative on the Tom. He's muted at the moment.
Tom's muted. Well, anyway, we got Larry here. I don't want to say that's more important, but
Larry.
Larry, love your show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, listen, part of why we invited you back was not just because you're an incredible guest and we love chatting with you.
Which he was one of the best so far.
One of the best, you know.
Listen to that voice, man.
I know.
I thought I had a good
Listen to
radio.
the sound of my head inflating as you tell me these things. My God, I'm going to fly around the room in a minute here.
It's oxytocin.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
OxyContin, oxytocin. Yes. So, but we, unfortunately, I don't know whether you tuned in, but we were meant to have an interview with John McAfee, but unfortunately,
Yes.
he got a virus, even though he's the antivirus king.
Yes.
And and we were going to chat. But you're here, so I'm fascinated. It was a great interview that you had with him. Before we go any further, how can people listen to your interview with him? What do they need to do?
Oh, very easily. Just go to thatlarryshow.com. And there's an archive right there of every episode ever on my show. And the McAfee one, it was a two-parter, 2 segments, 2 different weeks, and they're only about, you'll have to scroll back 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll find it.
Great.
Thatlarryshow.com. Yes.
Yeah, folks, it is definitely worth listening to. But tell me, what was that experience like for you, talking with this legend, this icon?
It was fantastic, I got to say, Dr. Joe. And the weird part of it is, I can remember downloading his software to my computers years ago, and I had no idea if it was actually, just a trade name. I didn't know there was a guy behind it all. I mean, who does, right?
Right.
And then a few years back, I saw this totally wild video of him on YouTube, surrounded by lascivious women and doing all types of outrageous antics, but he was extremely funny. He was a very entertaining guy. And I thought, God, I'd love to meet this guy sometime. And then suddenly here I am with my podcast, and one day I get an email from a listener saying, hey, would you like to interview John McAfee? Like, are you kidding? Of course I would. And so there it happened.
Wow.
And he was the first person you actually interviewed. Yours is a solo podcast, right?
Yes. In other incarnations, I interviewed a lot of people, but in my podcast, in 260 episodes, no, I'd never had a single guest. But how do I say no to the last American outlaw? The guy's too fascinating.
So let me tell you a little story. So Thomas was able to connect with Mr. McAfee and Janice and get us scheduled.
Yes.
And I'm thinking same thing, antivirus. I hadn't heard of the internet sensation of John McAfee, so I've been consuming as much as I can, starting with Joe Rogan, but his was from like 2016, and I listened to a number of interviews and trailers and this and that, and by far, bar none, yours was the best of the class.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very flattered. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I kind of hit it off with the guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt a rapport with him. I don't, he's not your typical, he's not the kind of guy I run into at the supermarket or the gas station, that's for sure, or the office. But he's a lot of fun. It's very easy to speak with, and kind of, he's really a world-class raconteur. He doesn't take a lot of prodding to get him to speak. John likes to talk.
Right.
And he's interesting. So
he's super interesting and brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And what I found most fascinating about him, listening to all of the different interviews, is when he tells these stories. I mean, he's concise. I mean, he uses the English language very well. He's very purposeful. But never have I heard any stray of any part of any one story. They're always spot on, exact. So there's truth. When I used to joke with Dr. Joe about when I was first a lawyer. I was a criminal defense attorney, and I used to always tell the clients, the easiest story to remember is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And he was he told some of those stories that they're so outlandish. You're like, what? No way did that possibly happen? And there it is.
That's true. The old adage, what is it? If you tell the truth, you never have to remember a thing.
Right.
That's right.
That's right. That's it.
That's absolutely.
And as an attorney, I remember hearing another great one from an attorney I knew years ago. He'd been a prosecutor, and he said he always wanted to write a book called Defendants Say the Darndest Things.
Yeah.
And he had a bunch,
That's funny. So how have you been since the interview? Did it help spike your show?
I got a big bounce in downloads, and a lot of new people turned on to my show, and it's just wonderful. John was really nice. Not too long afterwards, he tweeted it out, and he has well over 1 million followers. So it was a terrific boost for me. He's very, very kind. I mean, the guy couldn't have been any nicer. Usually I understand his interviews are fairly brief, but we spent about an hour together. And he was just great. And to think of here's a guy that really is living, as he said, I said, how do you like living on the run? And he said, well, I'm really not on the run. I'm in hiding.
Right.
But not long thereafter, since that interview, he has relocated twice, and that was just a few days before Christmas. So he is kind of on the run and in hiding. And I don't know how. I mean, the dude is 74 years old.
And he looks great.
He looks fantastic. He's got terrific vitality, and to live that way, even with his resources, and I guess he's fabulously wealthy, that still can't be easy.
No.
It just can't.
No.
So, pretty amazing guy.
Whereabouts unknown.
Yeah.
Whereabouts unknown. Yeah.
And you would think you can't hide anymore, but he would be the guy who would know how to do it, I would imagine, right?
Incredible, yes, because you hear, I mean, when people get tagged and caught is invariably through some type of digital tracking,
right.
And they say the only way to circumvent that is to be off the grid. Well, he is anything but off the grid. The guy's tweeting 5 times a day, videos. I mean, he's doing this, he's doing Zoom. So I guess he's really good at what he does,
Yeah, he must be.
He invented it, right?
I suppose he did. Yeah, he was the first. He was the pioneer of certainly of virus protection, and I guess you got to know a lot to be able to do that. So,
yeah. And you know that's one thing. And when we chat with him, is to just sort of figure out a bit more about where that came from and how he really got into it. And you know that's why it's a little disappointing that we didn't get a chance to chat with him today, so that the 3 of us and 4 of us, or Tom was on, could really explore this. But I'm just going to tap into your knowledge and again,
I think it's better. I think we're just getting more research to have that interview be that much better.
Well, that's true. That is true.
And it's going to be great. It's going to be great, especially when we start talking about the IM and the domains.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I'm going to be very interested to hear what he thinks about that, because he certainly seems to have run up against a lot of people who were not respectful to him and have not been treating him in a way that allows you to remember your value. And yet there he is, still standing, doing all these things, and
still speaking his mind.
Speaking his mind.
Yeah.
You know, so it's pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. Pretty remarkable.
It is remarkable. You know, I spoke to John. I mean, I asked him, he's worn so many hats in his life. He's been a tech titan, a centimillionaire, and now, of course, an outlaw. He is for several years now. He's been on the run. And I just kind of wanted to get a sense of who he is rather than what everybody else wants to ask him, which is which cryptocurrency should I buy, or how do I secure my device from spying eyes and so forth. And the guy was great. He was really forthcoming. He wanted to talk a lot. He went way back in his childhood, and he's a very, very interesting man. Mm-hmm. He really is.
Yeah.
And he's lived enough lives for any 5 guys. He really has.
Right.
But it also says a lot about you, Larry, that you're able to draw this out of a person. I mean, how have you decided not to do interviews on the podcast?
Very easily. I'm such a windbag, Dr. Joe. I just couldn't stop talking myself. There was no room for anybody else. And I guess I sort of ran out a little bit of air, and John was at the right place at the right time. But yeah, really, I'll tell you why. It's probably mostly logistics, and I'm sure you know this. I mean, you do a lot of radio. I'm sure you have a ton of guests, and they don't always show up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty frustrating. It's nerve-wracking. You know, I've been on the terrestrial side of radio. I know how that goes, and I thought, I'm just going to swing by my own tail and at least cut that element of stress out of my show. And so that was really the real reason that I began doing it just as a solo act, because I thought it might make it a little bit easier, not having to book people and then have backups ready and try to figure out what to say if they don't show. You know,
you're well over 200 episodes, right? Approaching 300 episodes.
Closer to 3 than 2, yes.
Right, on
yes.
Larry. How do you decide what to explore?
Wow, that's a great question. Sometimes it's a struggle because I really don't get too topical. I never get overtly political in the show, so that takes a ton of material off the table to exploit. I don't have guests, so that's also a deficit to deal with. Basically, I just sort of, I've always been a writer, and I've been fortunate in that all those 270 episodes, something has popped into my head, before showtime, and I can lay down a half-hour show and get it done. So a lot of it is drawing on experiences of my own life, from my childhood, from anything that I'm doing. I guess I'm a keen observer. I'd probably say that. So I sort of take notes. Everything I look at is material. Everything. So I might talk about an experience at the supermarket. I might talk about anything whatsoever. We took with my family a couple of weeks ago. We went up into the high desert north and east of Los Angeles, what I like to call Manson country. And wow, what a different kind of place that was. So I wrapped a show around that. That's kind of the way I do it.
And your latest show, Love in the Age of Coronavirus.
Yeah, give us a preview of that one. What's going on with that one?
That's what it is. It's funny, guys. I think that and I say it in the episode. After scandal, crisis and catastrophe is the general media's favorite food, and I would hope this does not expand into a pandemic, but we've kind of seen this movie before in the not-too-distant past, have we not? I mean, it was only, 4 or 5 years ago when people were, starting to stock up on masks and so forth for Ebola. People were terrified of that. You guys live in the snow corridor. I'm sure every snow flurry, according to the weatherman, is a developing blizzard, right? I know that, down in the south of you, every tropical storm has the potential to be the hurricane of the century. Right. So crisis is the lingua franca of the media these days, and I just think the thing is kind of overblown. So I get into it a little bit about the whole coronavirus situation and how it may just be hideously exaggerated. I certainly hope it is. Right. Past performance would indicate that it is, and then I was downshifted from there into advising one of my listeners about some hurdles he was trying to get over in his mid-20s, and I hope I did him some good as well. So it's a melange of anything. Could be stories, could be current, like I said, like the coronavirus situation, or it could just be my sage counsel, as I call it, to some of my younger listeners. Yeah,
and it's certainly true, right? The news adage, right? If it bleeds, it leads. I mean, that's one of the things that they say. And the Ebola, I mean, certainly the countries where Ebola was, it was devastating. It's a horrible, horrible disease. Horrible. But here in the States, there was a joke going around. Did you hear about the joke about Ebola? Don't worry, you won't get it. So that was, it's terrible. Terrible. Not if you're in a country where it's there, but but here, probably not.
So how are the viewers reaching out to you and asking you these questions? I know you've said a couple of times, you have the number one, how do I date a girl, right? And then number two,
it's primarily through email. That's usually where they contact me, or sometimes on Twitter, and sometimes on Facebook. I have a presence on all of them, but mostly I'll get emails, and that's the most common. Something I discussed with McAfee, which he found very interesting as well, is after a while you get sort of a theme. You realize what people are really struggling with in their lives, and two of the most common questions I get from my listeners are not how do I find someone to have sex with, but how do I find a girlfriend? Big difference. Yeah. Big difference. And it's kind of how would I say? It's heartening. It's like, wow, I'm kind of shocked by that.
Society's
this time,
okay.
Right? It's a great thing. And the other thing is, how do I get out of the job I hate, the career that I loathe? Okay, that's a very, very common one. And I put both those questions to McAfee, and he had some fascinating answers for me. So that's how they reach out to me. And I get other questions. People are, they've got a boss that's down at work. work, or maybe they think their wife is cheating on them. I mean, my God, you're a psychologist. You know, you've heard
worse,
it all.
worse. I'm a psychiatrist. It's much worse than psychologist.
He gets mad at the psychologist. I made that mistake a couple of times, Larry.
I don't get mad.
A little bit.
Who got mad?
I don't get
Did
mad.
I mislabel? Are you a psychiatrist? Not a psychiatrist. I was sometimes confused.
I am a psychiatrist.
I totally used to.
You're a psychiatrist. Excuse me. I'm sorry. You're a psychiatrist.
MD.
I'll just call you Shrink for short. How's that?
That's even better. You know, and when we talk, this is our shrink wrap. So
I like that, Shrink Wrap. That's a good name for a podcast.
Yeah,
I like that.
Name for a podcast.
yeah, I think somebody's probably using it.
Maybe.
My friend Gene Barres, who was my training director, incredible child psychiatrist, had a band. They called it Pink Floyd. Isn't that great?
That's good.
I think that's a good one, Pink Floyd.
I
Gene,
like
if you're out
that.
there, I hope things are great. So,
I like that.
So, but you've also in your career. I mean, you've written. How many books have you written?
About 5.
Yeah. And we got a chance to talk about Mac Daddy before. And what about your other books? I mean, what's going on with them? What was the one? I'll Never Have Sex with You Again?
Yes, that was kind of the springboard to Mac Daddy. That came out. I wrote that with my wife, and because that sort of took off nicely, then somebody said, "Hey, why don't you do a sort of I couldn't say a sequel, but a follow-up to it, specifically on being a dad." And it was a really I thought it was a great premise, because I think fathers get such a raw deal from the media, from Hollywood. It's really terrible what they do to us, you know, and very little of it is deserved. So that's why I wrote the book. It was kind of a primer or handbook to dealing with kids from birth to maybe school age, but it was also an answer to the constant bashing that fathers get, primarily in the media and from television and movies.
And you know, we were talking about that the last time we had you on the show a little bit, but what's your take on how did that culture really evolve, that dads were getting bashed like that? What's your take on that?
I'm not sure. One possibility is the denizens of Hollywood. It's kind of an odd industry, unlike any other. To become a psychiatrist, you have to spend a hell of a lot of time in school. Okay, take I'm sure batteries and batteries of tests, and go beyond, you know, peer review boards, and whatever. I mean, it wasn't easy to get to do what you do. Okay, Hollywood, just, hey, somebody shows up and says, "I'm a director, I'm a producer, I'm whatever." Well, you are. You know, there's no screening process. So it tends to draw a lot of people who are not terribly grounded, who maybe have some checkered pasts, and many of them are very resentful of their fathers, or the fact that they didn't have fathers. And I think they have probably an inordinate influence on the type of material that is written and produced. And they, of course, they put their own, you know, vibe into it, and usually it's dad is a yo-yo. You know, mom, I mean, think of your average sitcom. Mom is always hip, slick, and cool and making the money, and dad's a slob on the couch watching ball games and drinking beer most of the time, right?
And we think we're all dads here. Mark, what do you think?
I've always been fascinated by I refer to it as the 80s sitcom dad. You know, it's like, womp, womp, dad again. You know? And I never really understood it, because I didn't know any dads like that. I
didn't either. I don't know any dads like that. No.
Right.
No, where do they get those guys?
I don't know.
I don't know.
So I never realized why it was happening, but it made for good fodder, and people laughed.
Good fodder?
Sure. Yeah.
Did you say good fodder?
Good
fodder.
Fodder.
That was good. Sorry. Couldn't help it.
But at the same token, I think it did kind of, you know, neuter men a little bit in a sense that the perception became reality a little bit.
Yeah.
Do we know if Mr. McAfee has kids?
He has. I'll give you guys a caveat. I don't know if you want to go there because I did actually want to go there with John. As I said before, some people have called me America's dad. I think that's a hell of an exaggeration. However, in researching John, he claims to have fathered 47 children. Oh. And I said, John, if that's the case, then you are America's dad by far. I only have 2.
Yeah. Wow.
But he said he quickly sort of downshifted and said, you know what, I have a lot of kids, but I'm really a terrible father, and I didn't want to go there. It wasn't the direction I wanted to go, so I just kind of left that as it was, and we moved on to something else.
Was there any question that you did want to ask that you didn't have a chance to, or you thought about afterward, thinking, "Oh, I wish I had just asked that"?
Are you trying to get some intel?
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a great show, and we can help one another, right?
Absolutely.
Larry wanted to ask. He thought about it after the show. What is it?
Yeah, Larry. What about that? Was there something you would have asked?
I did want to ask him which cryptocurrency to buy, but
Well, hasn't he created one?
He's created them, sure, yeah, and he's fronted for them, and I mean, John's such a character. I mean, he claimed, I guess it was at least a year and a half, if not 2 years ago, that if Bitcoin did not reach $1 million per token by the end of this year, he would do something really almost impossible with his own anatomy.
Yeah.
And he's kind of walking that back now. So I don't know. I really, I don't follow that stuff much. It's fun to look at.
Did he say that? Did he say that with Dick Mattson? Is that where he said it initially?
No, that was to his just general. I mean, he's been saying that long before he started doing interviews. Yeah.
That's interesting. That'll be trouble for him. Now, are you a regular on that Dick show?
No.
Okay.
Dick and I, we got to know each other because we had the same editor for books that we did, and it was actually the editor that sort of connected us many years ago. And then when Dick started his podcast, he asked me to come on because he does do guest constantly. And sure, I said sure, and I've guested on his show probably half a dozen times. It's always fun. Yeah. But I wouldn't call myself a regular. No.
Got it. Yeah, there's a whole niche marketplace on the internet that most people aren't even aware of.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, there are layers and layers and circles within circles and ecosystems, and sometimes there's some crossover. It's really fascinating how it's developed. It really is.
And where would you say your demographic lay mostly?
That's a great question. It's probably, I would say, my listeners are overwhelmingly male.
Yeah.
And I would say they would tend to run from mid-20s to late 40s. That's about I'd say that's the bubble.
Well, that's a challenging demographic for advertisers to get to.
Yes, but I don't have advertisers. Mine is listeners supported.
Oh, that's right. You do Patreon. How is that? How's that going?
It's great. It's great. It's very and interestingly, it's kind of I think for I guess Gen Y and millennials and now Gen Z, they're very sort of open to it. Whereas I'd say that Gen X and Boomers, it's kind of a little bit alien to them.
Right.
So they're totally down with the idea of that.
Can you tell us a bit about Patreon? What is this?
Patreon, I guess, it goes back several years, and some smart guy figured out that there's all these people online are doing all type of creative endeavors, and they probably like to make it profitable, and so he created this website portal whereby you list your whatever you're doing. There's guys on Patreon that are podcasters like me. There's a ton of those. There are videographers. There are fine artists, guys doing oil paintings and sculpture, and I mean, you name it. There's almost no limit to it. What they're doing, and then it makes it easy for listeners or fans of whatever they're doing to contribute and support their efforts. So it's as simple as like a PayPal or a Venmo or any of these apps. You just list yourself there. You make it be known to your whoever your audience is that that's who you are. And if they want to, they can, with a couple of clicks, become sponsors of you.
So it's like a community support.
Community support, yes. And Patreon takes, I think, a 5% cut. And they're getting pretty rich pretty fast because, wow, it just keeps growing and growing. Yeah.
So any artists, comedians, musicians,
anybody.
Anyone.
Yeah, yeah, and some people who are, pretty enormous, even in the which would considered mainstream types now have Patreons. It's a kind of alarming how fast it has grown. Yeah.
But it makes sense. It makes sense if
it
someone
does.
is not necessarily interested in the corporate advertising and sponsors, or they're
sure.
not reaching it.
Who could do it? I would imagine you have a sales staff at your station there that deals with sponsors for you. It would be an immense undertaking, I think, to find those on your own. Some guys do it, I know, but wow, it's a lot of work.
Right.
Yeah, no, we've been very fortunate that WATD has completely taken that over. They haven't asked us to do any of that
great.
At all.
But the Patreon's kind of like a PBS, right? So there's almost like a telethon. If you want me to keep giving you this good stuff, you got to help support, right? The community, the public has to help me here.
Exactly.
So how does it work? Do you hold back certain material?
Yeah, I do. Most of what I do is anybody can get to, but then every month or so I will do a bonus episode, which is usually a little more personal, maybe a little more contentious, and that's only available to Patreons. And then those that are seeking my help or advice, my door is open as well to them through Patreon. And a lot of people say, "Hey, let's just keep this between us," and so I answer their questions via email. But a lot of them are really. It's amazing how often my listeners will say, "Hey, you know what? Go ahead, wrap a show around this, do it, because hopefully other people that are facing the same dilemma might be helped by this." It's really, I always tell my audience, I have the coolest audience, and I do. They're really a wonderful group of people.
But you've also cultivated this over the years. Do you feel that you have a brand now?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I do. It started out. I created this chimerical place from which the show emanates, and it's called the TNS Dojo, and it's the take no, and you can fill in the S for yourself.
Right. Rhymes with hit.
Exactly.
And starts with an S.
And so basically how that started was, a lot of people, all of us at some point in our lives, we find ourselves being backed into a corner or manipulated in some fashion. And Doc, that's a ticket to cancer of the soul and coronary episodes and alcoholism and so on and so forth. And so many of us allow ourselves to be taken advantage of, whether it's at work, at home, by a spouse, whatever. It's so common. And so if my show has a mission, that's what it is, and everything sort of emanates from that point.
So is it a matter of being self-aware of what's happening, or is it more of a way to react back to what's happening?
Both. It's a matter of being self-aware, of realizing, of keeping your radar well-tuned. And so at the first sign of it, that you feel you're being taken advantage of in any way, you simply must put your foot down and refuse to allow that to continue. And that's because the more, as you know, the more it goes on, the more they will heap on you, for sure. So that I found that has really resonated with my audience. And it's not like I'm some, a pugilist or something myself, but it's just that I've been around a while, and I've found myself in any number of situations, and I can look back at times when I did not react the way I should have, and woe is me because of that. So.
And then the stories that come in, obviously you can empathize with and understand, and then share.
Right.
Yes.
That is a great audience. It's a great sharing, vulnerable, and special thing that you're doing for people.
Well, I get a tremendous amount. I haven't worn as many hats as McAfee, Dr. Joe, but quite a few, and I find this more fulfilling than anything I've ever done. Absolutely,
because
I really do.
You're helping other people. It's a service.
I try to. I really do.
It's a service.
I try to.
And that was the moment where we really heard John McAfee just burst into a wonderful laughter when you gave him this compliment about where he was how did you describe it in terms of his black belt and.
Yeah, I mean, after listening to him and knowing something about him, I said, clearly you are, a 10th degree black belt in the art of not taking this, and he found that complimentary, which he should, because it was, and he is.
Did, and he was just laughing. I mean, you could hear this guttural belly laugh that was absolutely spontaneous. It just struck him, and I think that, for me, in your interview with him, that was a moment that, that really resonated, that there was something that you connected with in him that he just so enjoyed. And it was a wonderful window into this man that has been, such a mystery to so many people. And it really, I mean, Larry, you brought out this human part of him with that. Because laughter is such a powerful emotion, and we did a show on humor and laughter. Why do people laugh at all? And I'm actually going to be on a panel up in Upper State New York talking about humor and what it is.
Nice.
But that moment, that was fantastic. And he laughs, and there's a pause. And then he laughs again because
he went back for a second lap around the pool. Yeah. It was very gratifying, and you can see the guy who doesn't get through that number of decades without some bumps and bruises and scar tissue. Clearly, he does, but he seems very much at peace with himself and his wife. She's a wonderful. You can just tell Janice is a sweetheart, and he's in a good place, I think. And I asked him what makes him happiest, and he said being by the side of his wife, which is a pretty cool answer for anybody to have at any age.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I mean I feel very blessed that way. Not with John McAfee's wife, but being next to.
There you got him.
Next to. I got Larry.
Yeah. You got me.
It feels good, and it feels good to just witness it, right? That's the oxytocin.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. It's oxytocin. And, it's so important that we can take pleasure from other people's humor. We can take pleasure from other people's pleasure. We don't have to take their pleasure to have pleasure. And, I think that's part of, the dojo, the TNS dojo. It's important. And yet, from the I am approach, what we try to say is, if the best somebody can do is try to put you down, what's going on with them?
Right.
What's going on with them?
What is going on with them? Great point.
So, we're almost out of time. We have two things we ask all our guests, and I'm going to ask you again. Small changes have big effects. What small change can you recommend to our listening audience from the dojo?
I would say if you're experiencing sort of something that's negative in some part of your life, again, whether it's with your family, with your place of employment, maybe at school, if somebody is troubling you, belittling you, just resolve to yourself to say, hey, I'm not going to take this. You don't have to be a maniac. You don't have to be violent. You don't even have to raise your voice, but you do have to speak up for yourself if you feel you're being taken advantage of. And that's not a big change. It's pretty easy, really, if you do it. And it gets easier with practice.
Yeah. It's great. And then the second rule is you control no one, you influence everyone. Larry, what kind of influence are you hoping to be? Because you get to choose.
I'm just hoping to be an influence to help people have a better time in life and laugh like McAfee did. That's really all. That's it.
Laugh like
mission.
McAfee. Love
That's
it.
a great mission, Larry.
Hey, Larry, thanks so much for coming on the show again.
Thank you, Dr.
That Larry
Joe.
show,
Always a pleasure.
folks, listen to it. It is great. And we want to have you back again.
Yeah, I
if it's
hope
okay
so.
with you.
Anytime. Such a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, too. Thank you,
Larry.
gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
Did he do it for love?